Welcome to the 13th episode of my tutorial series on the AVR framework. In this episode, I want to be covering the tools. So basically, tools are objects which execute distinct functionality when pressing either the trigger button or the thumbstick button. I think this is best shown in VR, but for like with everything, we have to enable it in the experience object. I'm not going to work in the tutorial map for now. I'm going to work in the showcase map, which is our default map if we open up the project. And to take a look, let's go into experience, demo space info, and change the experience object. In here, we have to ensure that our radio button tools is enabled. And we also have to set the tools that we want to have, that we want to use. So this is already in place in the default objects, but make sure you add the tools that you want to be using if you plan on if you use a new project. So let's take a look inside. So now that we are here inside VR, we can see that we have several tools available to us, and we also have the tools inside the radio menu. So if I open the radio menu, we can see that we have 4 tools. I'll just quickly go over them one by one. So the first one is an annotation tool, that if I press the trigger, I draw a line. If I release the trigger, the line stays there. If I drop the object, then the palette menu will reset to its former state, because the palette menu cannot exist without the tool, and the tool cannot exist without the palette menu. The second one is a camera, which I find very nice. So if I press the trigger button, it'll create photos, and I can look at those photos in the library. I can print them, and I can export them to my hard drive to a specified location, and I can delete them. So if I drop the camera again, the photo camera will reset. So the next one, also a nice tool, is a paintbrush. So I can draw objects in real life. So if I draw, it'll take the spline, and if I use a thumbstick, it'll get smaller or bigger depending. If I drop the object, I see that the spline that I just draw is an actual object that I can move around, and it even has a selection menu, and I can delete it normally. The last tool is the coloring tool that I wanted to go over. So this one, very, very simple tool, which just takes a component and overrides it to material. So for example, take that and it draws this material on there. And if I throw it away, the palette menu removes itself. Okay, so that's it about the palette tools. We not only have the palette tools available to us, we also have other tools which can stand by themselves. So for example, we have a gun here. If I just normally pick it up, it will snap to my hand and the controller will disappear, and I can just shoot projectiles with it. I can drop that gun just like you would normally. I can also pick up the flashlight. The flashlight, if I press the trigger, it will show a light, and I can make it less and more bright. I can even drop that, and I can also pick it up with a hand and do exactly the same thing with it, pressing the trigger to drop it. Notice that, like any other object, the flashlight can be made to fit to the hand, so it snaps perfectly into the hand. Same, for example, with this thing, it snaps to the hand. If I press trigger, it stops the animation. If I start trigger, start the animation. And another really nice thing is, for example, the whiteboard. So let me switch to the to this controller, for example. I could use it to draw on the whiteboard. So this pen doesn't do anything on the trigger, but if I, for example, use a thumbstick, I can draw smaller or larger depending on what I want to draw. And I can even use 2 pens, and I can draw simultaneously. I can place those pens somewhere or drop them depending, and I can even erase the other way. This has to be erased quite a bit, but with a little effort, it's all quite clean. Basically, just like in the real world. Okay, so this is all that I wanted to be showing about tools. Let's dive into the code and explain how the tools can be made to work in. So let's take a look at the tools itself. To find them, go into blueprints, interactables, tools, and there we can see that we have all of our tools available. And I think the flashlight is a very, very good example of how tools could work. In the flashlight, we have turning the flashlight on and off. So basically, we have the event set active. If the trigger is being pressed, then if the trigger is being pressed, this is going to toggle the event set active. And we also have the thumbstick, which is being forwarded to the tool, that if we use the thumbstick up or the thumbstick right, we increase or decrease the light intensity. And this is basically how you make tools. Of course, a camera tool or the other tools are a bit more complex, but the light, I think, the flashlight is a very good example of how easy it is to implement a tool. This is basically all that you have to do. There's one additional thing that has to be said, and this is the get relative laser position. That means that if we pick up an object, the object should be relative to our original position, and this is being defined here. So this has to be tried out. So for example, if I didn't change the relative position, the flashlight, if I pick it up with a laser, it would be pointing up instead of pointing in front. So this rotation and location has to be a bit adjusted depending on how your mesh looks in order for it to snap perfectly to the hands to where you want. Okay, so this is all that I wanted to be talking about the tools. I think the tools are a very powerful and useful tool inside VR, and are definitely necessary if you want to do some interactions with the world, or have some interactability, or use items in general. And I hope I will see you in the next episode.